Hey there guys, welcome to this video for today, and in this video I'm having a bit of a discussion about when should I stop upgrading or when should I stop pushing the power level of my deck. So what we're discussing here today is when you should stop pushing up the power level or stop upgrading your deck. And honestly, that's up to you. I can't tell you exactly. It's up to you to make a decision, but this is more of a discussion to say, well, how can I make these decisions and why should I look at maybe stopping upgrading or stop increasing the power level of my deck. Now, these aren't exactly like things that go to like together in hand essentially. Is that if you upgrade something you're always increasing the power level? It's not always the case. Or if you're increasing the power level you're always like upgrading essentially. Like in a sense, putting in more powerful cards is upgrading, but in the other sense, like it's not mutually exclusive. Like if I'm updating or upgrading my deck, essentially with worse cards or whatever, then or with less powerful cards, then perhaps my deck is becoming weaker. So I'm not upgrading the power, I'm downgrading the power. So you can do that as well, but you can't really. If you're changing your deck, you're changing your deck. So you're always like upgrading your deck from being whatever it is, or changing it from whatever it is to something else. So that's always the thing that will happen. You say, okay, well, I want to change my deck so that it's at a certain level, or it's a certain power, or I'm happy with it, or I can just play with my friends or whatnot. That's the thing that I think most people want to have. They want a deck that's decently powerful. They can pull out of their box or their binder, whatever, like wherever you're storing your deck or your deck box or whatever you've got, to pull it out, play it, have some fun, and do what you want to do with your deck. Like again, what's your deck doing? Like that's one of those things that is inherent in upgrading and sort of also in power, because when you're taking cards out of a deck that sort of do something but they don't really do what your deck's wanting to do, or they're just like slower, clunkier, more inefficient cards, like I was sort of saying, with taking cards out, putting cards in, you've got to take good cards out sometimes. So sometimes a cheaper, more efficient card will beat out a higher drop card, because it's like, well, Keeper of Fables isn't that good of a card or whatever. It's just okay, or it's just good enough for the most part. But then when other cards come out that are cheaper, more effective, can do more things and whatnot, that you just kind of go, well, I just don't have the time for this card because it's just too much mana, and there's just too many other things that do essentially the same thing but better, or for less mana, or do more things. So again, you're always like going, well, it's a decent card or whatever that I have over here, like perhaps I always think like Grave Titan or whatever. Grave Titan is a very decent card and things like this. There are a lot of these cards, but you've got to be happy. Is that the power level? Like that's your like one of your main cards to say, okay, this is the power level I've decided. I've decided that Grave Titan is going to be one of the most powerful cards in my deck. Like, okay, cool. Like it does do a thing when it enters, and that's a usually pretty powerful thing. It doesn't do a huge thing, but again, if it untaps and whatnot, it can do even more, and it can keep doing more and more throughout the game. Or is Sun Titan one of the most powerful cards in my deck again? So again, sometimes the cards that you're putting in your deck are like, this is one of the most powerful cards in my deck. that's when you can like identify like where you're sort of at with what you're doing. Like when I look at my deck, a couple years ago, maybe because I maybe didn't have the money or I didn't really want to push myself too much into quote unquote the rabbit hole, I guess, is like one of the more powerful cards was Endray's Forerunners, because it was like, okay, this basically is the main win condition of the deck. Once I have most of my stuff out on the battlefield, all of my tokens and whatnot, or whatever I'm doing, if I'm doing big gruel stompy stuff or whatever it is that I'm doing, that will give me the last little buff and the vigilance to stay back on defense if I need to, in case not everyone's dead or whatnot. But it will probably finish me the game in these next couple of turns. So that's one of the most powerful cards that I could have access to at the time. But then I started going, you know what, I want to, increase, slightly some of the cards that I've got, and just like there often is gaps in the deck, and it's like, well, I need some more haymakers and whatnot, and that sort of thing. So, Pathbreaker Ibex found its way into my deck, and then I've, moved up to having Craterhoof Behemoth in my deck as well. So it's just one of those things where suddenly you can go, okay, well, that's the most powerful card in my deck, but realistically, that card is only as powerful as whatever else I have going on is doing, sort of. Like, like if you're like, well, I have this 2-card combo essentially in my deck, again, that could be really powerful and can be very powerful sometimes, but again, like I was sort of saying in the tutors video, unless it's fairly consistent, like it's one of those things like, well, how often is that, going to come up? Not often, because, again, it's one, or it's each of them is 1 in 99 or whatever. So, the chances of me seeing one of them are pretty low, and then the chances of me getting them together are pretty low. So, like, overall, how likely is my combo if I don't have those things? Things like that. Like, that's also another thing, like upgrading or, increasing the power of your deck can be like, it is just like, well, I've got to cut all of these other cards that, yes, they might do something for what the deck's doing, but are they cards that actually find me my combo, protect my combo, or stop somebody else from comboing? Then no. If it's not one of those, then I just really don't honestly need them. I just need the mana to cast the spells that I need to cast to win and protect my combo, and enough, interaction and whatnot to stop other people from winning. That's the kind of like CDH mentality. That's like where it's like, okay, cool, that's all I need to do. But again, like, your deck can be anything. Like, again, like I always say, your deck can be at any power level. You can do what you want to do. Just because I say, this is what I think I want to do, or I think you should do, isn't, 100%. Sometimes I'll look at somebody's deck and say, well, what's your win condition or whatever? And they'll go, win condition? And I'll go, okay, well, you might want to think about putting one in. And they're like, nah, I just want to run it as a deck that doesn't really have a win condition and that and whatnot. And like, and then I'll be just like, but how are you going to win? Like if you get into a game and then just be like, oh, okay, cool, I have no real way to win, like, how can I win? Then you're kind of like, well, yeah, how much fun is it for you to not be able to win and for the game to be slowly dragging on, and you're just sort of spinning your wheels the whole time, and it's just like, oh, okay, cool, I'm just kind of sitting here hoping that my opponents don't have anything, or I can keep them from having anything or whatever, and then hope that I can gain some kind of an advantage at some point to try to win. Like, it's one of those things. It's like, eventually I say you need to find yourself a way to win, because it's like, you don't want to have people sitting there going, okay, come on, the rest of us can't really do anything, and that's one of those things. It's like people want to just see, okay, here's my win condition at a certain point, and be like, okay, here's how I'm going to win, whatever. It's going to take me a few turns to actually do it, but do you all want to sit through me, watch me do this whole, like, drawing down to it and da-da-da-da and all this sort of stuff? Most people won't, again, because it's just like, well, we just want to see what your deck's doing because the rest of us can't really do anything at this point. So it's like, well, just show us how your deck wins so that we can all scoop or whatever, like things like that. So that's one of those things where at some point you need to go, okay, well, why does my deck need win conditions? Like, why am I facing people like this? Or how many times am I facing people like this where I go, I do need a win condition because, yes, I don't want to have the game drag out on and on and on and things like this. So, and again, like, you can still build very, like, low level, like, low power decks that have a, strong win condition. Like, that's not, to say that you can't build a deck that doesn't have a win condition or even a combo, or whatnot. But again, it's one of those things where, like, what power does, any one card add to a deck is sometimes subjective. It's often just saying, well, how fast is the deck? Like how low to the ground is the deck? How much, how often do you, get out to insane starts? How, like, many mana rocks, do you have that, just like are 0 mana rocks? How many very cheap, mana dorks or whatnot do you have? Things like this. How fast can your deck get off the ground? Because once you're getting off the ground, you're getting going and doing more things and can cast more spells and can obviously win the game more easily when you have, that fast mana, that fast start. And it's also how consistent that is sometimes too. So if sometimes you go, okay, cool, this time I really didn't, do anything. I sat there and I played a few lands and, did a few things here and there, but never really had much going for me. But in the next game, I just, like, played my Sol Ring turn 1 and then, Arcane Signet and then did something else turn 2 and then just basically won the game on turn 3. Like, you go from these two extremes of going, okay, cool, I won this one game over here on turn 3 or 4 or whatever, but on that other game, I barely did anything and was just sitting there and was basically dead for the whole game, and really couldn't do anything because I just didn't have the right cards or the right pieces or enough, card advantage or whatever to get the pieces or enough, tutors or whatever and the right cards to do really much of anything. So everything is part and parcel of, like, how powerful your deck is. Like, it's not just, oh, all my stuff is one mana. Wow, that sounds like your deck is really good, but it could be just like, yeah, sure, my deck is low to the ground, but that's also its biggest weakness. It's not just being low to the ground, it's also being able to, like, keep that low to the ground thing going. Like, if you have white weenie or red aggro deck, whatever, things like this, like, all your deck is 1-drop, red creatures or 1-drop white creatures or whatever, this sort of thing, for the most part, it's like, okay, cool, but how sustainable is that? Like, as soon as a board wipe happens, you're pretty much out of the game because, again, like, how much recovery do you have? And you've got to commit very heavily to the board to be dealing significant damage to people and to get around, like, people's mid to late game blockers because, again, you're not going to kill people in just 1 or 2 swings with a whole bunch of 1/1s or 2/2s or whatever and things like this. So, again, it's one of those things that you're going to struggle because there's you've got all of these one drops, but then you don't have enough card advantage or whatnot to, gain back, what you lose after, removal happens. And yes, you're very low to the ground and aggressive, but again, once you get out to that fast start, it's sort of like you can peter out very quickly. And again, when you start petering out, people can deal with what you're doing, and unless you actually end the game in those first, few turns, which is very hard to do, it can be done, but it is harder to do. But you just won't be able to sustain yourself because the other opponent's decks are running more powerful, more effective overall cards and whatnot than what you're running, and cards that just deal with your strategy more easily and whatnot. You also run the risk of flooding and things like that because, again, your curve is so super low that, extra lands really hurt you, and again, just top decking lands at a certain point when you really need more gas, it's just like, well, that means I don't have enough pressure and that I won't be able to do anything, and won't be able to keep the pressure up and whatnot. Even if, there is more like, again, okay, cool, I just drew another land. Well, that's not going to help me now, so, again, it's not just the fact that your deck is low to the ground that makes it strong. It's like, okay, I have these win conditions within those slots. This means that I will kill everyone, most of the time, when I'm doing what I want to be doing in this sort of thing, because I've got all these tutors or whatnot, or I've got all of these cards that basically roughly do the same thing and will mean that I can combo off or do whatever, in an aggressive way, very consistently. So, again, that I don't have to look at, what's going to happen in the late game. All I've got to do is, have enough mana to cast my 2 or 3 cards, whatever, and then I will win. Again, that might not be, again, a thing for everybody to play because it's like, again, more pushing to a CEH sort of level, but again, or a more highly tuned or whatever level. So, but again, that can be very inconsistent. So, and can be dealt with in other ways or whatnot. So, it is one of those things that it's hard to judge exactly what makes a deck able to be doing the things that really push the power level. And again, you can see it a lot of the time because let's say a card like Beast Whisperer, that's just a generic card and it draws me cards, but is something like is a card like Rhystic Study better? Because again, with Beast Whisperer and even with some of these other spells that are, you pay 4 mana or pay 3 mana, whatever, and you basically don't do anything with it that turn, you don't get any advantage with Beast Whisperer until you have more mana, can untap. But Rhystic Study, you don't have to worry because it's well, my opponents are going to cast stuff, and are they going to be able to pay for it? Not always. So it's one of those things. It's well, Rhystic Study is a lot better because it's one of those things I can just tap out and I don't have to worry about the fact that I can't follow it up myself. But it's one of those things. It's I'm one of those people that's I don't really like cards that are like that, for multiple reasons, but one of the main reasons is that I think I want to be in control of what I'm doing mostly. I don't want to rely on my opponents doing things for the most part so that I can get an advantage or get a benefit or whatever. There are some cards that I'll play that are like that, but for the most part, I don't really play cards like that because it's just well, I don't want to rely on my opponents to do that because, again, opponents can be unreliable. Opponents can miss their land drops, things like this, and then you're just like, oh, okay, cool. Or they'll intentionally not play land sometimes or whatever, just so that you won't get a benefit out of it sometimes. But that is a bit odd sometimes for them to do because it's setting them back as well or hurting them as well. But, sometimes when somebody's trying to troll you, they're just like, well, I don't care. As long as it's trolling you, I don't care. But again, like some of those cards can be mitigated by the way that people play or, the amount of, mana or the power level of the other decks that you're also facing. So again, somebody plays, like, has a Burgi perhaps on the field, and then you play like Rhystic Study, and then they go to their to do something, they play like Dark Ritual, and then you're like, well, do you want to pay one for that? And then they're like, oh yes, but how I'll pay for that is because my Burgi triggers and I get a red mana. So yep, I pay for that. Things like that. I don't need that red mana for anything else, so I'm just going to pay your thing with that. Things like that, yeah, sure. Like, again, getting around some of these like effects is one of those things that does happen. But again, so the obvious like thing is, as I said sort of in the intro, is build to where you're happy with it. But that's the thing, like, I think a lot of decks are like different, and like a lot of people again are different, and that's sort of what this whole like sort of thing is about. It's like everyone's different and every deck is kind of different. So some decks kind of want to be left alone for the most part and be like, yeah, this is just a janky like fun deck, or whatever, and that's the way I want to play it. I don't really care too much that I can do this thing over here with it, or I can do that thing over there with it or whatnot and make it more powerful. This is what I want to do with this deck because that's what I want to do, and that's what I'm doing. So that's it. There's decks that are like, this deck seems to be a very like powerful, potent commander that wants to do some very powerful things. So I might build it in a more powerful way, not CEH level way perhaps, but again, a more powerful way than what perhaps a upgraded precon perhaps is. Not completely optimized again, maybe, or maybe yes, complete or close to completely optimized, perhaps, but again, still it's doing its thing that I want it to do, and that's at the level that I want it to be at. I think consistency is kind of the thing. Like, my deck does the thing that I want it to do when I'm playing it. Like, if you play a Tulane deck, it's always like, cool, I play my creature, I draw a card, I can play a land. I play my creature, I draw a card, I can play a land, that sort of thing. That's one of those things about like decks like that pilot themselves kind of thing or whatnot, or they're the benefit and the enabler and whatnot all wrapped into one kind of thing. So those decks, a lot of those decks are, powerful to an extent, but again, they're not the most powerful, but again, they can run away with the game because they get so much value so quickly and so easily. Core Vault's another one and whatnot, things like that. So it's like these are meant to be built more powerfully than just like, I have, let's say, a random crab as my commander, like whatever that crab guy is from Zendikar Rising, I can't remember, Cherax, or whatnot, like, again, and it might be fine. Again, it's not up to me to tell you that it's bad to have like, or whatever, but, a less powerful deck. Again, I have a less powerful deck, and again, like, I look at that deck and go, well, this is the way that I want to play this deck. I still want to play it as best as I can and do the best things that I can do with it, in a way, and I want to put things into it that make it as good as it can be, but it can only be so good because, again, I've put that restriction on myself of going, well, this is what I want to do with that deck. This is the way that I see that deck being, a deck that I can have fun with or whatever, and I know what's going on with it, not just. And that's another thing, build to what you know. If you're a person that plays a lot of just janky, fun, silly decks that aren't really that powerful, then just keep building those fun, janky decks or whatever. If you want to build some more powerful decks, and that's what you have fun with, then build those slightly more powerful decks. If you want to go full on CDH, then just do it. If that's what you have fun with, then those are the things that you should do. But I think, if you want to try to build something more powerful or maybe even less powerful, again, that's up to you. You are going outside of your comfort zone a little bit. So you've got to, if you're building a less powerful deck, you've got to lower your expectations of what the deck will do and just be like, oh, okay, cool, this is a restricted thing that I'm doing, and it's got 5 pieces that really make it work. So I'm going to have less expectations of this deck, and just whatever it does is whatever it does, and I'll still be happy to play it because this is a fun and interesting deck that I want to play with. But again, if you want to up your power level, I don't always say that you should expect more per se, but you should be ready for more per se. Is that you need to get some time in and really goldfish your deck and know what your deck is doing, because you don't want to be sitting there going, oh, this triggers this, and then I'll do this, and oh wait, I forgot about this, and oh wait, I also forgot. There's all these little things going on. You've always got to be paying attention, and it's easier to goldfish the things and be able to make decisions quicker and know what you're doing. And it's also one of those things, you never know what your opponents are going to do, but you always sort of think when you're in those more powerful decks that, well, if this resolves type thing, this is what I'll do. But if it doesn't resolve, then what will I do? Those are the things maybe you should think about, because it's well, how many times out of 10 is this going to get countered or whatnot? Is this a game? Threat assess your own deck is a way to sort of think about this and whatnot. Again, is this a thing that's worth countering? If I was on the opposite side of the table and I was looking at somebody playing my deck the way I'm playing it, would I want to counter what I'm doing, essentially? So that's a good way to sort of help you sort of work through what you're doing and why you're doing it and what will probably happen in the games and what decision making you can sort of make when those things happen and whatnot, because you want to know what you're going to be able to do. And sometimes you don't have many good choices or whatnot and these sorts of things. So it's one of those things well, okay, I don't have many good options, but what do I have the mana for? And sometimes you want to play 2 3-drops or whatever, or you want to play 2 5-drops or whatever, but you don't quite have the right mana or whatever, and you're just well, I don't want to play these 2 things unless I can play them together, so I'm just not going to play anything. I'm just going to pass the turn and wait for another turn and hopefully be able to cast them both then, because I really want both of these things to be happening together at the same time so that I can get the advantage straight away, especially just in case something happens. It's one of those things. Or, I want to be able to hold up this other spell when I play these other cards, because again, I want to be prepared just in case something bad does happen or whatever, so that I can get around the next things or whatnot, and get back in the game afterwards or whatnot, things like that. So, yeah, again, power level, where you want to be, and again, where each deck wants to be is subjective, And, there is a point that, you go, okay, cool. I'm happy with like where I'm at in the power level of this deck, or I'm happy at the power level that I'm at, and I'm just going to keep making decks that are almost all around the same power level for the most part, because that's the power level that I want to play at. And I just want more decks, more diversity of decks that people can play with, because I don't want to have people play the same deck over and over again, because again, that gets boring and everyone's sort of seen the same thing, and whatnot. So it's like, well, this is just the same deck but in different colors, so it's not that exciting. But again, I do tend to like to play the same sort of thing, at least roughly, But again, that's unto everyone. Like, everyone has their favorite flavor of ice cream, sort of thing. Again, so when you get down to it, like if you look at the decks, like why is my deck like that? Why do I have so many Voltron decks? Why do I like playing that archetype so much, or whatnot? Or why do I not like playing it that much, or whatever, those sorts of things, and that whole thing. Or why is my deck so powerful? Why do I always seem to win on turn 5, even though I've got just a Voltron deck? It's because, well, my deck's pretty powerful and pretty consistent, and no one can really stop me, because I really get going out there and protect my commander really quick, and commander damage people out fairly quickly and things like this, or whatever. So again, it's all about like context, and like, are you happy with that? Is that the way everyone else is happy with your deck playing? Like, again, it is a playgroup dependent thing sometimes, and people might go, well, I am happy with how powerful that deck is, but I don't want to play it against my, janky, fun, silly deck. I want to bring out one of my more powerful decks to face that deck, because I know it's, a deck that I don't want to mess around with, and I'm just not going to have much fun with if I don't bring a deck that is, decently matched up against it. So, again, it's one of those things. It is, dependent on many, many, many different factors. So yeah, you just need to decide those things for yourself, or have other people help you, decide that or whatnot, and have discussions about that and whatnot and things like that. Is everyone happy with that or whatnot that you're going to play with? Or are they going to be like, well, I was going to play my, janky, like, fun deck here, but if you're going to play that deck, I know it's probably, pretty powerful, so I'm just going to bust out one of my more powerful ones. So, again, just be cognizant of that as well. Be like, hey, this time I want to play my more janky fun deck. Would you guys want to play a more janky fun game this time, or whatnot? You can always have those different games as well, where you're like, okay, cool, we're just going to have this relaxed, sort of more game, so, or whatnot. So those can also be a determinant of like the games that you play. Like, in this game, we're going to push the power level up there this time, and that can be another discussion or another thing for another day as well. But again, I think it's still relevant to discuss a little bit at least. But anyway, guys, hope you've enjoyed this bit of discussion here. Hope it's thought-provoking and whatnot. And let me know what you think. Definitely write your thoughts down there in the comments below. Be sure to try to comment back to everyone, reply to everyone. I really appreciate all the comments and all the love you guys give the videos, so thank you so much for those. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Hey, you've just finished watching one of our videos. A bunch of other videos are popping up on your screen now for you to check out, so why not check them out?